My wife and I, Karen, and so don't be using that cuss word Karen around me at this church, okay? She's a good Karen. I want you to know that, all right? We got some other good Karens in this church. So my wife Karen and I, we moved to Cincinnati 11 years ago to plant this church. 10 years ago, we moved from downtown to the west side. But through different circumstances, Karen and I lived in a few different parts of the area. When we first moved here, we lived near downtown in the West End. We actually lived in one of the John Gamble houses. It was an apartment that had been converted, and it was awesome. We were just maybe a few blocks from Music Hall. We then moved to a parsonage that just so happened to be in Oakley, and so we became those people who kind of had to, get their passport and come from the east side over to the west side to do our work. And then circumstantially, we were planting a church. The campus pastor who we had prayed for didn't work out. And so Karen and I took kind of the mantle to plant this second church. And we had a church member who talked us into moving up north to help with that plant. It was a beautiful community in Mainville, and we lived there. We bought a house there for several years. We loved that house there. But then about a year and a half ago, we bought this church property, and we knew that once Revive was settled and had a home, we wanted to live close. So we bought a house just a few minutes down the road, right off of Ebenezer and Delhi. So you better be watching out. Don't you cut me off and flip me off, okay, on Cleves Warsaw, because you don't know who's riding in front of you, behind you there. And now, here's the dissonance, though. We had ministered on this side of town for nearly a decade, but we really didn't know it until we moved here. We really didn't feel it, even though we were here week in, week out, 5 days a week or more. We really didn't get to know it until we moved here, and I am so glad that we did. I think if you guys will accept me, I think we're true Westsiders now, and here's why. Because we don't want to leave. Like, that's the most West Side thing, right? Like, we don't leave. We come here and you stay. And over this past year and a half, as a church and my family, we've got rooted. Isn't that a good word? We've got rooted into the community. And we just kept meeting people. This church has just grown like crazy, and so we're trying our best to meet as many people as possible. We've met so many people over this past year while we've lived here in Delhi, and we just start hearing like the same story over and over again. We get to know people, and we'd say, "What's your story?" And then there were just so many people, like Karen and I had to we had to go man-to-man defense. And I'm like, "All right, you go that direction, I'll go this direction," and then we get to know people, we go have lunch, go have coffee, something like that. Then we come back and we would say, well, what was their story? What's so-and-so's story? And it was just funny. It's comical, really, that we would just keep saying the same thing over and over again about different people. You met with someone, what was their story? And then we say, oh, well, that's their story. It's the same story. The only thing that different people, but the commonality, the common thread was where they grew up, which was the West Side. So unconsciously, I'm going somewhere with this, all right? Unconsciously, we would just shorten the conversation to something like this. We'd say, oh, hey, you met with so-and-so, what's their story? And then we say, oh, typical West Side story. Anybody know, probably you could guess. I'm not going to have you say it out loud, but how many of you think you could guess what the typical West Side story is? It's just typical West Side story. It's the same story over and over and over again. And we said that so often that I began to realize it was more than a coincidence. Sometimes it takes someone who's new to see things you've gotten used to. You ever had, all of us have that thing at our house that we don't like? You know what I mean? That weird thing, that quirky thing, or that thing that's broken, sir. That honey-do list that you haven't got to yet. It's been 5 years, and you haven't got to it yet. And she used to hound you, right, for the first 2 years. And then finally she gave up because you realized you're just going to come home and be lazy. That's what you just, determined to be. I don't feel like, and it's what's amazing is, like, whatever your profession is, if you do that thing for a living, you're not doing that at home. There's no way. I'm not doing it. If I'm a floor, I'm not laying floor at home. No way, And so there's that thing that's at your house, and you just get used to it over time, and then, like, it just becomes invisible. You don't even see it until you have company. Women, am I right? Am I preaching well this morning? Please give me some verbal affirmation, right? Yes, thank you. Until you have company, and then it's like, did you get to that thing? Did you fix it? And your husband hasn't seen that thing in 5 years. It's invisible to him. It could be right there, first thing you see through the door, but suddenly it's only when there's someone new who is confronted with your environment that you begin to see things you haven't seen before. Now, there are beautiful things about this typical West Side story. There are beautiful things that have, I want to say this to you. I really want to say this to you. This is special. That are become common to you. To you, it's just normal West Side life. And if you're not a West Sider here today, I promise you there's a message for you at the end of this sermon. I promise you that. But let me just talk to my West Siders, because really, we know this is the best side anyway. You know what I mean? The rest of them they're going to have to figure that out later. But there's this beautiful thread about our community that needs to be celebrated. Like, what happened for those families who had that fire, and the way the community rallied around, and what Eric and the other people did, that's a West Side thing. Where everybody knows everybody. And Kim, you're kind of like that type person. You know everybody, and you know someone who has clothes and furniture and china, and you're going to make that connection, and we're going to get those people some stuff. And I bet you, Kim, you were up in this place getting some people some stuff for those fire, because that's what we do, right? That's what we do for the community. And some of you are just so used to it that you don't see how beautiful it is. And there are other parts of, and I've lived in more than Cincinnati. I'm from Dayton. I've lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've traveled all over the country. And there are some communities where it's like, good luck. Good luck. Me, mine, and ours, and that's it. My four and no more. And so I'm so grateful to live in what I call a real community. Me and Noah, we were at First Watch this week. You see there all that. Look at that stuff that the people brought in this week for those families. Me and Noah were at First Watch this week on Harrison Avenue, and we were having breakfast, and I posted, it's good to be back. Boys are back in town. And Tim Moore commented underneath it, that couple behind you, invite them. I know them. True story. Invite those people. I know them. And when he commented that, it reminded me of a conversation that I had with a professor at Cincinnati Christian University. We're talking like missiology, and how could a church really impact the West Side? And this professor told me this. It's profound, but it's very simple. He said, if you really want to reach the West Side, drive around on a Sunday morning when the Bengals play, and find a house that has 15 cars parked in the front yard. Y'all know what I'm talking about right now? Befriend that person, and they will introduce you to the whole community. How many people know Tim Moore is one of those people, got 15 people in the front yard, and he knows everybody? It's like, invite those people. I know them. Of course you do, Tim. Of course you do. That's such a West Side thing. That's beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that wonderful? I love that. But then there's other things that become invisible to you that are broken. Things that you just gotten used to. You don't see it anymore. But it's not the way that things should be. Unfortunately, not all of our commonalities are beautiful. Some are broken. Generational sins. You know what I mean by generational sins? Can I prove all of us have some generational sins? I'm going to say the first part, you say the second part, and some of you don't even know me, but you're going to say this. What happens in this house? Stays in this house. Generational sins, brokenness, things that we have gotten used to. We are products of our environment. We get used to things that are broken because it's all we know. And sometimes God sends a prophet. Sometimes God sends someone new to say, hey, did you know that was broken? Did you know that's out of place? Did you know that's not the way it is everywhere? And so that's what this series is about. The brokenness and the beauty of our stories. And this series has 5 angles, or facets, if you will, if it's a diamond, that we'll begin exploring today, and then the final message will be on Easter, which is March 31st this year. And so some of you didn't know that, so you need to make a note of that. You know, the West Side Story is also a musical. It's a tragic love story. It's a modern remake of Romeo and Juliet. It's one of the most classic stories of them all. And as I just think of a biblical connection to this series, there's another classic story that Jesus taught. I love that Jesus was a storyteller, because a story ignites parts of your brain that mere facts can't touch. And perhaps, my opinion, the most classic story that Jesus ever tells, the parable, the story, an earthly story with a heavenly meaning, the most classic of them all is found in Luke chapter 15. And it's a story, believe it or not, that's common to our community, to our side of town. And if I really could think more grand, I think this story in Luke 15 is a common story to all Western civilization, a true West Side story. Here's how it goes. Verse number 1, let me teach for a second, and then I'm going to give you the point really quickly, but the point at the end doesn't come to the very end, so you got to hold on until you get there. Verse number 1, Luke 15, it says, then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him to hear him, and the Pharisees and the scribes complained, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. The tax collectors were not highly regarded people because they helped the Romans, and the Jews hated the Romans, their occupiers. And not only were they helping the Romans occupy the land, but then they had got rich off of the people's back by cheating them with their taxes. And so they had been ostracized, these tax collectors, by their religious people. And then, so here in this verse, it says that they're tax collectors and sinners. The sinners are the immoral people, the irreligious people, and they had different occupations that the religious people didn't think was compatible with the law. And so there's all this like laws built around staying away from those people. There was a statement that the rabbis would say. It says, one must not associate with an ungodly man. And they take that so far that they won't even teach those people the law. So not only, like, are we not going to hang out with you, but we won't even do church with you because you're tax collectors and you are sinners. And worse than mere, association would be the idea of eating with these people. Because it wouldn't be just being associated with these people, you would be welcoming them and recognizing them. But Jesus didn't let religious people mess up his plans. Jesus would not be censored or let his ministry be interfered by starchy, cold religious people called Pharisees. He had come to help sinners. And you can't help sinners unless you can meet sinners. In the previous chapter, Jesus talks about the cost of discipleship, and he calls for a wholehearted commitment. And then he says this, he who has ears, let him hear. And then notice what it says, verse number 1. And then all the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to what? To hear. This is what I love about Jesus. The people you would think wouldn't like him, love him. The sinners, the tax collectors, the irreligious people, They love Jesus. And the people you think would love Jesus, people who study the law, are blinded by their religion, and they're not listening. The sinners are listening. The religious people are not. And so Jesus is speaking, and he tells 3 different stories with a common meaning to help these Pharisees with their underdeveloped theology. The first story is the story of the lost sheep in verses 4 through 7. The second story is of the lost coin. And the best, or the final story, is the story of the lost son, which is verses 11 through 32. All of these stories would have challenged how these Pharisees, these overly religious, they were more strict than God, literally. It would have challenged how they viewed the Father, how they viewed Yahweh. The great scholar, Jewish scholar, says this. He says, this is what they would have discovered through these stories of Jesus, that God actively seeks out sinners and brings them home. Yes, the rabbis agreed that God would welcome a penitent sinner, but it was a new idea that God is a seeking God, that God is the one who takes the initiative. You see, they had this underdeveloped view of the Lord. They had this saying, here's a Jewish saying, there is joy before God when those who provoke him perish from the world. It's like this hellfire and brimstone. How many of you are familiar with that type, right? The hell, fire, and brimstone. And it's incomplete. It just shows God in his wrath and his justice, but Jesus shows a different concept, a complete concept. One who rejoices over returning sheep more than the many who are safe in the fold. There's joys over those who are in the fold, but there's more joy about the one that we find out lost in the wilderness. Amen. Yeah. And again, they didn't have a concept for this in their worldview. They had an incomplete theology. This is what they said. They said, if a man keeps seeking for a lost coin, much more he should seek for the law. But there was no rabbinic equivalent of God seeking sinners, God searching for a lost coin. And if you don't understand their culture, the lost coin really doesn't make sense because you're like, I lose change all the time. Get into my couch and, we really could bless this building fund at the church. But this coin would have been much more like an engagement ring for this woman. You with me? This literally happened. It was one of those snow weekends where there was salt all over the floor of the church. And one of our volunteers who helps us in the kitchen with all the coffee and the snacks, Katie, she calls me after church frantic. There you are, Katie. Frantic. Am I saying that correctly? Frantic. Yeah. She says, Pastor, one of my diamonds in my wedding ring is gone. The setting and all is gone. I think it fell off at the church. Could you please go by and look for it? And I'm thinking, man, this is not good. This is not good. I just hate that when people have a bad association with the church. When our church was downtown, people used to, remember, Mom, you remember this when people got parking tickets going to church? They didn't usually come back to church after that. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking, Katie's going to lose her one of her diamonds, one of her, man, she's not going to want to come back. This is going to be a bad day. Every time she goes in that kitchen, she's at least not going to want to serve. And so we walk into the church, Karen and I, this is after church, everybody's gone, and we're looking on the floor, and there's salt crystals everywhere. Every single one looks like a diamond, I walk into that church, I walk in that kitchen, I look right on the counter, and there it is. There it is. There it is, right there. I call Katie. I said, you're not going to believe this. She's like, what? I said, we got it. We found it. And she said, you're lying. Why do we do that? Why would I lie? Oh, yeah, I'm just kidding. No, it's lost. Gone forever, Katie. No, it's just like it's just that relief. You don't know what to say. So there's that relief. Like, oh, you're kidding me. And she said, well, just bring it whenever. I'm like, no, Katie, we're bringing this right now. Mama's getting this diamond today. Hey, we rejoiced. We rejoiced that day because we found it. That's how that woman who would have found that coin felt. And these rabbis had no place in their theology that God would be pictured as a woman finding her lost engagement ring and rejoicing over it. They had an incomplete, underdeveloped view of who God was. And so we see Jesus is building. He's just building. There's four verses about the lost sheep, 3 verses about the lost coin, and then there are 22 verses about the lost son. They're all symbolic about the same thing, but it's as if Jesus is showing his hand on what matters most to the Father's heart. It's from this story that we derived our purpose statement. Some of you have seen it on our website. Somewhere in this building, when we get settled and we know where we're all going to be in the same place, we're going to put this on the wall. But from this story in Luke 15, our purpose statement is we take personal responsibility for every lost son and daughter in our city. We will follow Jesus and invite others to join us so they find the way home and experience God's love. And in case you didn't see it, if you look to your left, my right, welcome, this is home. You made it. You made it today. You made it home. That came from 2 experiences I had before we even started the church when I'd moved to the city. Quickly, number 1, there was a man who was homeless. He was addicted. He had a dependency. He asked for help. I helped him at first because I felt like a duty to do it. And then at the end of that conversation, he asked to talk to his mom. He handed me the phone, and his mom said, "Pastor, thank you for caring about my son." And I had an awakening in my mind and my spirit. Every person in this city is somebody's son and somebody's daughter. Amen. That someone's praying for, someone's hoping for, someone loves, and they just need to be cared for. And then after that, right when we were renting our first trailer to put all our things in for a church, I was going to the U-Haul. I was telling the U-Haul person about what we were doing, putting all our stuff in this. We're going to have a church service. And he says, "Where are you meeting?" I said, "We're meeting downtown." He says, "My brother has been downtown for this many years. He's homeless down there. This is his name. This is what he looks like." And he said these words, "If you see my brother, tell him come home." And I thought, man, that's it. That's the mission. There's people out there who are lost, and they've given up. They've lost hope. But if I see them, I'm going to tell them, come home. That's where our mission came from. That's where our purpose came from. It's a story. But I could add a third story. And it's a West Side story. I've heard it time and time again. If we're being honest, it's so many of your stories. Possibly the majority of the room would identify with this story. What's the story? It's the story of lost sons and daughters. It's the story of prodigal sons and daughters who are coming home. You grew up in some type of faith experience. And then somewhere along the way, you got hurt, you got disconnected, you went a long way from home, spiritually, physically, and then you came home. It's like, it's physical. Like, people try to escape the West Side. They leave, they go all over the place. Some of y'all been all over the world, and here you are back. Came back. You came back. But then there's this spiritual thing that has been happening for the past 11 years. When we find people, usually they're not in church. They're disconnected from church. They're hurt from church. Something's gone wrong. Something has gone bad. Or you just gone. It's not relevant to your life. But usually what happens is you've experienced some type of pain. And you start thinking about home. And you meet someone. And when you meet somebody, it's not the same old starchy, cold, judgmental feeling that you felt before. You know what I'm talking about? It was they're actually glad I'm here. And they're not worried about what I'm dressed like, and they're not worried about all these things. They're not judging me, and there's some other people who have tattoos too. And I kind of feel good. I look like some other people been out in the far country too. Yeah, I'm not the only one over here who's done some stuff. Matter of fact, I saw them over there. I know if they can come to this church, I'm welcome at this church. Yeah, that's right. That's just, man, I'm telling you, it's like The majority of the people in this room right now. That's your story. I don't have time, so let me just give you the Cliff Note version, okay? Look at verse number 11. It says, then a certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls on me. So he divided to them his livelihood. Here's just a big question. I don't have time to preach this whole portion of Scripture. So let me give you some big ticket things maybe you haven't thought of. Number 1, why? Why would this young man ask for his inheritance? Why? Now, the Mishnah handled the laws of inheritance. Here was a law that they had. The eldest got the double portion. Meaning this, the eldest got 2/3 of the inheritance. Can I propose to you? We don't know why. The son never says why. We don't know why. But let me give you 3 hypotheses. Number 1, maybe he felt like life wasn't fair. Brother gets all this, I get the leftovers. The younger son doesn't give a reason for his request, but then we see what starts to come about, what was manifested once he gets control of his inheritance. What does he do? He goes out and he wastes it. He goes out partying. So number 2, maybe it was because he felt like life wasn't fair, or number 2, he just didn't want to miss out. Dad's got me stifled. Dad's got me here, and I can't do anything, and I can't go anywhere, and all this Jewish rules, and all this religion and stuff. And I've heard about what's happened up there in Syria. They're having real fun up there in Syria. If I could just get down to Texas, if I could just go to Charlotte, if I could just get down to Florida, that's where all the cool people are. That's where they're really having fun. There's nothing to do in this city. There's no fun to be had. I'm going to go down there where they're having fun. Am I preaching to the right crowd this morning? Amen. And I don't want to miss out on all this fun everybody's having, and so I'm out of here. Notice this. He's going to gather everything he has and go to a far country. What does that mean? That means he said, I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. I wonder how many people have heard that before. But then ultimately, it's revealed. I don't have time to talk about it. It's revealed in his own statement. When he comes back to the Father, he says, I've sinned against the Father. I think thirdly, and this is a big one for us. Just letting that one set in for a second. We don't know what it is. It's unspoken. We don't even know the mom in this story. She's nowhere to be found. But there's something that's not spoken, but it's there. He never says what it is, but he says, finally, I've sinned against the Father. This breaks my heart for you, church. The story I hear over and over and over again is, we had some issues back home, and we just don't talk about it. We just act like it's not there. And that only lasts for so long. You keep stuffing that down, stuffing it down, and before you know it, you blow up or you get out. And guess what he chose? Get out. Fight or I'm gone. Never coming back. There's a need for a loving, responsible, guiding father on earth, and that's a valid need. And there's a real loss when that is not experienced and that need is not met in someone's life. And what's really twisted is so many of our earthly fathers can warp our perspective of God. If you've never received your father's approval or affection, it can lead you to a tendency for looking for approval or affection from unhealthy relationships. An abusive father can lead to a mistrust of people, especially men, and God. An emotionally absent father can lead to you seeing God as disinterested or bothered by you. A father who shows up every now and again, and when they come with gifts, and then they vanish, can lead to this emotional disconnection. It's protection. Put up that wall so you don't get hurt again. It's that scene in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know what I'm talking about? That scene. And you just keep putting that wall, you just keep scabbing that scar over to try to heal, but it never heals. It's always there. Sometimes it's not warranted. Sometimes you're just a rebel. But it doesn't mean if it's not warranted, it's not real. You feel it. And we leave. Verse number 13. And not many days after, the younger son had gathered all together and journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. Noah, if you'll come and just help me, just you, just Noah, just for the second. Give me 5 more minutes, church. Can I do that? Can I have 5 more minutes of your time? He gathered everything. He went far away because he probably thought, I'm never coming back. And then what happens to us happened to him. Hardship has a wonderful way of bringing people to facts. Right? I don't like him. I don't like her. I don't like this. But I am struggling. I don't know what to do. I don't have food to eat. I can't pay my bills. I'm living in my car. I keep going back to this toxic relationship even though I know it's not what's best for me. I keep going back to this addiction even though it is literally killing me. I just keep going back to it. And then those facts just hit you in the face. This guy is in such a bad state. I wonder if there's someone in the room today, and I'm leaning into it because I want you to know there's a good news to the end of the story. He had gotten so bad off. You ready for this? I wonder if anybody has felt this way before. People took care of the pigs better than they took care of him. Has anyone ever thought before, I'm going to be honest with you, I've been there before. Not with my own family. But if I could just be a dog in one of these, like, you know what I'm talking about? Well-off, privileged, kind of like, man, they just live in the fat life. You know what I'm talking about? I told you, do you remember when I told you about my wife being a steward for a high-profile couple? That dog lived better than all of us combined. I'm telling you right now. That, and all like, where did she go? Where did Nantucket? Dog lived a high life, and I would think, man, if I was just that dog, I'd have the most awesome life. Now that's funny, but there's some people in this room today who have literally thought, my mom and dad love their dog more than they love me. They treat that dog better than they treat me. Or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's like they treat that neighbor better, or they treat my friends. I've heard that before. My mom and dad treat my friends better than they treated me. But facts hit you in the face, don't they? Verse 17. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and do not perish, and I perish with hunger? Verse 18, I will arise and go to my father. I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Here's what happens. This is the end. It's coming. Here's the end. He reached a turning point. What's the turning point? What's the turning point? Was everything gravy in his heart and his mind with his dad at this point? Here's the turning point. Number one, he got honest with himself. The Bible verse 17. He came to himself. He came to himself. Of all the people we lie to, I think we are most pathological personally. We just keep lying to ourselves. It's going to get better. 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 And it doesn't get better. And the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And you've just been doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we keep telling the same story, expecting different results. Stop lying to yourself. Be honest. Have enough love for yourself, self-worth and respect for yourself, that you're made in the image and likeness of God, to be honest with yourself. He got honest, and then what else? He got up. Verse 18, I will arise. That's it. That's the turning point. I could read you the rest. None of it even really matters. He does this big, long speech. He rehearses it, and he gets there, and guess what the Father does? Who cares? That doesn't matter. You were dead, and now you're alive. You were lost, and now you're fine. Some of you right now got all this stuff wrapped up in your head and your heart, and you're projecting, and you're thinking, and you're fearful, and you're anxious, and you're like, but if I do this, but if I go there, but if I go back, and it's just forget all of that noise. Come on, start being truthful with yourself, and get up. That's it. Turning point right there. Get up. Start moving. Stop being stuck. I'm going to put one foot in front of it. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know what this is going to be like, but I'm just moving. I'm tired of living and staying here. I'm going to be honest with myself enough that this is not working. Yes. Yes. He expresses the sorrow for not what he had lost, but what he had done. It wasn't about the possessions. It wasn't about the things. Nothing like tragedy where we realize it's not about the things. We'll get past the things. Those things can be replaced. Those things can be fixed. Those things will be forgotten about. But it's you. It's you. You are what matters. You're the most valuable prize to the Father. Don't get caught up in all the details that keeps you stuck. He realizes who he really had sinned against. Recognition here is that you sin first and foremost against God. He says, my sins have been piling up to heaven. I have sinned against heaven. And maybe you're at that moment right now. You're at the turning point. And you recognize it. It's not working. I've been lying to myself. I got to make a change. I know, if I'm being honest, I've caused this mess. My sins are piling up. But what happens if I go home? You want to know quickly? 4 things. Here's how the Father meets him. He runs out to meet him. He puts a robe on him. He puts a ring on him. He gives him shoes. And he gives him a meal. The robe represents his position. Bump that hired servant noise. You're my son. You belong to us. We wear this, you wear this. You're ours. Ring represents authority, especially if it's the signet ring, the ring that they make transactions with. Hey, I know you blew it before. That's okay. I'm not the God of second chances. I'm the God of many chances. I'm going to give you another chance because I love you. I'm a merciful God. I forgive you. My mercies are new every morning. He put shoes on his feet because it was the slaves who didn't have shoes. Those with shoes, you would know that they were free. And I want you to know those addictions, those chains, those things that are holding you back are not your calling. They are not your identity. Jesus put shoes on you. You're a free man. You can be delivered. You can be free. Yes. And then lastly, and all God's church people say, because we like this one the best, don't we? Come on, he gave us a meal. He killed the fatty. That's the one they've been saving up for a long time for a special event. He killed that, and he said, let's party. Now, here's the realization, okay, and I got to be done. I'll pick up next week because there's a whole part of the story that no one ever talks about. I wanted to get there because no one ever talks about it. So how about I will save it for next week. But I can't end right here. Notice how the scene here ends with him coming home. You ready for it? You ready? I don't know if you saw it before. Everything he went chasing out in the far country, he gets at home. What was he chasing? The party life? Guess what happens when he comes home? Party time. See, that's the lie of the enemy. It's his first lie, and it's his continual lie. It's the story he keeps telling over and God. Did God really say, God's holding back on you? God's holding back on you. God doesn't have your best interest in mind. Do it this way. Do it your way. And that's how you'll find fulfillment. That's how you'll find what you want. That's how you have fun. And then you go out there and you blow it, you waste it all. And you're like, what a liar. The devil is a liar. He's a liar. And then you come home. You come home. And everything you wanted, the Louis, the drip, the juice, row. The ice, ring. You with me? Shoe game, boom. Jeff Ruby's, come on, kill the fatted calf. Everything they went out there chasing. Notice this, chased him. The Father ran to him. And he didn't have to ask for it. He wasn't asking for it. It chased him down. Does anybody have a testimony that when you get things in alignment with the Father, when you humble yourself, when you repent of your sin, you get things in alignment, you get up, you get honest with yourself, you don't have to go chasing those things. Those things come chasing you. They come following you. Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the... This is home. You're home. So maybe somebody needs to stop chasing whatever it is you're chasing. And you need to realize God's been chasing you the whole time. All you had to do was turn around and get honest. And that's what this moment is right now.